dark side. Light this bitch up.
What is up? Oh, my intro just went away. What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. Okay, sorry about that choppy intro, everybody, but today we have a Blackballed doubleheader. And I'm actually really pumped. I used to go to a place when I lived in Toronto called Grossman's Tavern. And it was a really amazing, and it still is, I think, but it was a really amazing blues bar when I lived there. I haven't lived in Toronto in about 6 years. But it was always a really cool place to go to see like heavy hitters in the blues scene. And you know, and it's a small venue and it's intimate and it's dope. Like all the best players kind of played there. And there is a legendary blues band called the Downchild Blues Band. I think they just go by Downchild now, who have been around since the early days in 1969. I think they celebrated their 50th. I think it was in 2019. And now they are playing tomorrow night at Massey Hall. And today we have one of the best horn players ever, okay? And this is coming, and he's one of those guys that has a reputation for being like just a brilliant horn player from industry people, and I always love those cats. You know, you always hear about these. Sometimes musicians have like, obviously they have stellar careers, but they are famous among famous people because of how talented they are. And we have one of those dudes here today. He is Pat Carey. Pat, how are you, buddy?
Hey, James. How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for all the kind words.
No problem at all. Listen, you're a wind instrument player, so I was trying to figure out a way to word this. I had a harmonica player on before, and my first question to him, and you know, it's an honest question, but it's kind of, you know, not PC. But you're probably really good at cunnilingus, I'm imagining. Is that correct?
So they say.
Yes. Just playing. Listen, I wanted to know something because I know musicians. I'm 46, and I know musicians that have played for 20 years or 30 years and this and that. When do you come into a place where you're like, my entire identity for literally 3/4 of my life is playing this instrument? And is it something that you have to kind of like get used to? You know, like I'm not asking if you get bored with it, but like I need to know what it's like to be that, because most of the musicians I know end up putting out a couple albums and then they go become managers at like a Home Depot. So,
right.
You know, like what is it like to sort of have that as your identity? Are you living the dream? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, from the age of, I started playing in bars when I was 15 years old up in Thompson, Manitoba.
Right.
I was born in the Pas, Manitoba. Went to high school in Thompson. So I started playing there, moved to Winnipeg when I graduated high school, and just fell into the music industry then. And I've been playing professionally since 1977, and it's never stopped.
Winnipeg, it doesn't get the credit it deserves for being one of the most artistic cities, not just in Canada, but anywhere.
Yes, that is true. There's so much going on in Winnipeg for such a small place, you know?
And is it a good place to cut your teeth as a musician?
Yeah, it was a great place to be young, and especially in the late 70s, because there was so much music going on in Winnipeg. And every band, whether they were a blues band, rock band, everybody played original music. Everybody. And when I moved to Toronto in 1984, somebody went, "Oh, do you want to go see this clone band?" And I'm going, "What's a clone band?"
Is that what they called them? Clone bands?
Yeah, clone bands.
Oh, wow.
Or cover bands, or, you know.
So like oh, right, okay. So the clone bands were the ones that just changed one word to the name of the band, like Furvana.
Yeah, or you know, a tribute to AC/DC, or you know.
There was a band. Who's the? You probably know the name of this band. Caution Jam.
Yep.
Caution Jam was like, whenever I knew they were playing, I had to go see them with my buddy who got me into it. I didn't know who they were until like, I don't know, the early 2000s or something. But holy crap, it was like listening to the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, super talented. So tell me about the show tomorrow. It's at Massey Hall, which is one of my favorite venues in the entire city.
Yes.
And
go ahead. It's going to be our first time in the renovated Massey Hall. So.
Oh, is it renovated now? Is that what that whiteness is in the background, or is that taken somewhere else?
No, that was taken. That was taken at the Southside Shuffle in Port Credit.
Okay.
But yeah, Massey Hall just reopened, I believe, last fall. It was closed for a couple of years for renovation.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful venue. I'm sure it's still beautiful. Did they refurbish or did they like redesign the whole thing? Did you do sound check there yet? Like what's it look like now?
We haven't seen. I'll see tomorrow afternoon at soundcheck.
Okay, well that's interesting because I loved how classic it looked. Like you know, it was like the opera house, but not as dingy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So where do you live now?
I live in Etobicoke.
You live in Etobicoke.
Yeah.
Give me an idea of what it is like to, because by the time you got there, you got to Downchild in what was it, 1985, I think?
Yeah, June of 85.
Already a legendary band. Did you
Yes.
have to try out or did they just tap you? Like, how does that work?
When I first moved to Toronto, I was playing with Donnie's brother Hawk in Hawksville, because Hawk had left Downchild at that time. So he was going by Canada's blues singer, Hawk Walsh. And Donnie was just restarting Downchild after Jane Basie had passed away.
Okay.
And that was Jane and Donnie were boyfriend, girlfriend, and her passing away was very upsetting for him. So he actually had shut the band down for a couple of years because she passed away in 82. So the album I first played on was sort of the Downchild comeback album. It was called It's Been So Long. And that came out in 1985 or 86.
Okay. I'm looking at all the people that you played with, and it's crazy. Sarah Vaughan, Tony Bennett, Mel Torme, Buddy Guy, Sam Moore, Little Anthony, The Drifters, Dan Aykroyd. And so my understanding is that Downchild was the inspiration for the Blues Brothers. Is that right?
That's totally true. Yeah.
So have you ever seen the movie, I think is it called 20 Feet from Stardom?
No, that's I know I've heard about it.
Okay. I'm wondering if session musicians feel the same way that background vocalists feel, like where they're, you know what I mean? Like they play with all these famous people. And you listen, I'm one of those guys that like, I think guys like you hold it down for the famous people. I think that they would be lost without you.
Yeah,
right.
That's a big part of truth in that.
Yeah. So can you give me, I want to get into that conversation with you a little bit because my world is hip hop. And so I'm trying to like, discover what your world is like. And when I think about session musicians or background singers, I always end up thinking about that. So do you have any like insights or stories that you can tell that kind of lives in that vein?
Yeah, I mean, session musicians, I mean, it's meant different things in different decades, obviously. But, you know, in the 1970s, for example, and I would presume early 70s, his name, Bob Seger. He came up to Toronto to record, was it Against? No, Night Moves was recorded in Toronto. So that was all pro Toronto guys. Doug Riley played organ on it. The background vocals were all girls from Toronto. Mm-hmm. But in the 1970s, everything was done with live players in the studio.
So that's a Nashville thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, in any style of music in those days, it was, you know, it wasn't done with machine. It was done with live players. And that continued, you know, through the 80s, even into the 90s. Electronica, a little more starting into 90s, 2000s. But all the live music, blues and jazz, is still all done with live players in the studio.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, there's people are talking a lot about AI and what that's going to do. There was an interview with Portishead from like, I think it was like it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And even though they used the drum machine as part of their act, the example that this the lead singer gave when she was talking about the sort of invasion of digital sound was that, you know, you might be able to find a way to get a guitar to do everything that you want to do by using a computer, except hearing the fingers drag on the strings and the human element of playing.
Right.
Blues will never be invaded if that's kind of the case, right?
Exactly. Blues and jazz. I mean, yeah, jazz, experimental jazz, that could happen. But yeah, with roots music, and that includes, you know, country flavored music, blues music, what we used to call rhythm and blues music. That's to me, I don't see that ever changing. That's going to be live players.
Can you give me a Mel Torme story? Because I can't even imagine what he might be like in person.
Well, those four people that you mentioned, Mel Torme and Lionel Hampton, Sarah Vaughan, and Tony Bennett. That
Yeah.
was when I was in Winnipeg, and I believe it was about 1979. And the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra would bring those people in as guests,
Oh, wow.
but they would hire a big band to supplement the orchestra.
Right.
So on the stage, there would be, over 100 people on the stage. So I was playing alto in the big band with Mel Torme at that, or with all those guys at that. It all happened like 1979, 1980. So we basically, they have their book, they come in, they rehearse with the big band and the symphony.
Yeah.
And then you do the show. So the funniest guy was Lionel Hampton, because Lionel turned to the Winnipeg Symphony, and he's in the middle of a tune, and he turned to everybody and he went, "Let's jam!" All the string players are like, What's
I don't get paid to do this.
I don't know how to do it."
Yeah, that's right.
All the guys in the big band start jamming, and
It's funny. I never understood what a conductor really does. Like really, are you really going to go off point if he stops doing this?
Well, with a symphony orchestra, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. With a big band, not so much. But.
Yeah. I'm going to play a solo that I found online before we went on air, because I want people to understand who we're dealing with here.
Okay.
And you are. I listened to about an hour or so of your stuff preparing for this yesterday, and then I was just like, "This is like you're just amazing." So I'm going to play this, and we'll come back in a second. First of all, I love the way the session guitarist looks at you, because he's young. He looks a little green almost, and he's looking at you like, "Wow, this is fucking amazing." I'm playing with Pat. But another thing that it reminded me of, I'm into hip hop, and there's a weird trend that's happening, and I have a funny feeling that it started with blues, because there are, when I was growing up in the 90s, rappers would fall off the scene roughly the same time athletes would, like in their mid to late 30s, and they would just, that would be it for them. But certain musicians that keep going, do people like yourself, do you feel like you get better with age because you don't stop and you keep going, and so that muscle never relaxes?
And I think, as you get older, there's more clarity to the music. You're not ever second guessing yourself. I know what I'm going to play. I know what it's going to sound like. The only intangibles are, do I have a good read, or, can I hear myself well enough? Things like that. But,
right.
Just with the experience, that's what you gain. Just, I'm going to go do it. I know what to do. I know what's going to sound good. Right.
Do you have like an area, like it's a weird question to ask, I know, but would other people say that, when Pat Carey was in his prime, or are you been riding your prime since like the 80s?
Be riding my prime. Yes, absolutely. Since the 80s for sure. Yeah.
Tony Bennett, is he a dick? He seems like a little bit of a dick.
Nope. Not when I worked with him. Total gentleman.
Do those guys hang out with these session musicians afterwards ever? Or?
Usually guys like that, they're back to the hotel, flight the next morning, off to the next place.
Yeah.
Often
do you have any? Give me a story. Give me something that I can sink my teeth into, because I love I love listening to who did I have on? I had Billy Vera on.
Oh yeah.
And he's got the greatest stories, like Joe Pesci stories and stuff, and and I know that you don't want to talk out of school, so I'm not looking for scandals or headlines or nothing like that. But I was just kind of wondering, because in the small, like I won't call it a career. I nibbled the edges of the music industry as a performer back in the early 2000s. I did like maybe 20 live shows over a period of like 3 years or something like that. And even I have stories.
Right.
I mean? Like John Legend one time told me when I walked in, he's like, "Are you my drummer?" And I'm like, "Yes." I don't know how to play the drums, right? And he brought me up because I just wanted to go into the green room with John Legend. I'm just like, "Oh, I'm not playing this venue," and I just took off. I got all nervous or whatever. But I don't want to put you on the spot, but give me something to sink my teeth into.
Well, I got a funny story. I was getting married in Key West, because we used to play down in Key West all the time with Downchild at the Green Parrot. So the night before I got married, we went to the Green Parrot, and there was a band there from Boston, Sweet Daddy Cool Breeze. So I look at the stage and I look at the drummer, and it was Kennard Johnson that used to play with James Cotton that I knew really well.
Oh,
So
wow.
Kennard's like, Pat, what's going on? What's going on, dude? And I said, well, I had no idea you were here. We were just here hanging out. And he said, you got to come back tomorrow night and play. And I went, well, you better ask my fiance because we're getting married tomorrow afternoon.
Wow.
So my
smart
wife,
man. That's why you're still married, Pat.
Yeah. But my wife being so gracious, she said to Kennard, of course Pat can play tomorrow night.
Nice.
So we got married in the afternoon, went to Kelly's for supper time, and went to the Green Parrot and played till 2 a.m. with
That's
my
beautiful.
good
That's
pal
beautiful.
Kennard. Yeah. And then shortly after that, he passed away. So it was good timing to get to see him again. That's
another thing about being in the music industry for as long as you have, is that you see so many people go.
Yes. Yeah.
Give me a couple of names, because I know that you've been playing for so long that, like, and has it ever inspired any writing?
Not really writing, but my really, really close friend Michael Fonfera, who had played with Downchild from 1992 till he just passed away in 21. Michael was a complete legend. He played with John Lee of the Checkmates in Toronto. He was in the group Rhinoceros. He produced and played with Lou Reed for well over 10 years in the 70s. Wow. Played with the Lincolns in Toronto. And Michael was he was incredible. Played in all kinds of bands with him here in Toronto, all kinds of studio sessions. So that's the kind of, people that we're involved with.
Okay. Well, listen, we have Marc. Do you know who Marc Jordan is?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you know him?
I don't know if we've ever met personally, but.
Okay. Well, he's in the green room, and he's supposed to come on any second now, but he's not on yet. But I want to replug the show. The legendary Downchild. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah.
Yeah.
I was agreeing.
Okay. Tomorrow night, Massey Hall at 8 p.m., the legendary Downchild Blues Band featuring special guests Daniel Lanois, Natalie McMaster, and Kenny Blues Boss Wayne. This is Pat Carey. Pat, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, James.
You have a good night, sir.
You too. Take care.
Bye now. Yeah, I love talking to musicians. Musicians are dope. I see we have Marc Jordan's head.
Yeah, it's attached to all sorts of things. So
yes. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. How are you?
Thank you for. I'm doing well. Eric Alper was really gracious enough to set up my interview with Pat and with yourself. When I did my Marc Jordan deep dive, I was just like, why would this guy ever talk to me? Your career is amazing. I'm looking at all of the people that you've now, when I look at the list and I see people like Holly Cole and Natalie Cole and Diana Ross and Cher, Olivia Newton-John, Amanda Marshall, are they singing songs that you wrote for them or covering songs that you did?
Covering.
I
never write for people because I actually don't know how to.
It's hard to step into somebody else's emotions, isn't it?
Yeah. And they sound contrived when I tried to. I have tried. So I just decided I would make songs that were truthful to me. And then we're all human beings, so there must be something that is resonate to other people too. So
let me ask you. I asked Pat a similar question, but being around as long as you have, do you ever feel like because you never left the industry? And the example that I used was rappers, because rappers in the 90s and early 2000s would retire at like 35 to 40. And it was mostly because they stopped working. I'm wondering, because I'm very curious, for a singer-songwriter as accomplished as yourself, if you keep working, do you keep getting better, or do you find a stride and you live in that place until you retire? Like for yourself personally?
Well, I can't really speak for others, but I've changed over the years, for sure. There's different influences. There's getting older. There's having children. Your emotional landscape changes as you get older. So you write differently. And when I was a young, in the 70s, I was just trying to have hit songs, but as I grew older, I wanted to write songs that had a bigger meaning, and I didn't give a fuck about whether they got on the radio or not.
When you stopped giving a fuck about whether or not they got on the radio or not, did that sometimes turn out these amazing gems that ended up being on the radio?
Kind of.
That is the loudest cell phone I've ever heard in my life.
That's Lou Pamonti. This is Lou Pamonti, my producer. Lou, I'm doing an interview, baby.
What's that?
I'm doing an interview.
Are you?
Yeah.
Right this second?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay, I'll call you later.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay. Okay, bye.
I actually don't care. I love that shit. I you know what I mean? Like podcasts are people got podcasts all wrong. Podcasts are supposed to be casual. They're supposed to be like this, right? This is the way it is, baby.
Life is like that.
It is. Who were the guys that you listened to when you were finding inspiration in the 70s? Like, were you Bob Dylan guy, Paul Simon? Like, who did you like look up to?
My father was a classical singer, and he didn't really, he was in that school, but he understood jazz as well, and he understood instinctively a lot about music. And he said to me when I was a young guy, he said, if you want to learn how to sing lyrics, listen to women. Listen to Ella Fitzgerald. Listen to Billie Holiday. Listen to Lena Horne and Nina Simone. And he said, men don't pay as much attention to the words as women do. And I think he was right. And so I listened to a lot of Billie Holiday and a lot of the women who did jazz in the 40s and 50s and 60s. But then when I heard Dylan, of course, that changed my life.
Really? How so?
Well, because before that, you had writers and you had singers. And Bob Dylan was one of the first guys that wrote his own songs and sang them.
I did not know that.
Well,
Really?
think about it. Yeah. Because everybody before
they were
him,
doing standards and having people write for them and all that kind of stuff. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Tin Pan Alley and all those, places in New York where they would crank out songs.
You mentioned, I want to go back to the thing that you said about women singers, because one of the things that came to mind, especially when you mentioned Billie Holiday, was not only did women pay attention to the words more, maybe even kind of were more technically sound as well too. Like their vibrato seemed, when I think of vibrato, I think of and a male singer, I think of opera singers like Pavarotti. But I can name a dozen women off the top of my head that mastered that sort of technical part of singing.
It's true.
And also they're in the music business, like Billie Holiday as a black woman in the 40s and 50s. Like her emotional IQ must have been off the charts.
Yeah, I guess so. That would be my assumption as well. And they didn't play instruments. Nina Simone did, but by and large they didn't play an instrument. So their instrument was their voice, and so they articulated and they spent their time on that, I think.
When I interview musicians that are in their 20s and 30s, I ask them this question, and I feel like your answer is going to be a lot more compelling because did you ever have a chance to work with anyone that was not your idol, but someone that you truly admired before you became a somebody in the industry? Like what I mean by that is, when you were still cutting your teeth and you like, oh, I love this person, that person, that person, and then maybe 10 years later you worked with one or two of them.
Oh, Joe Cocker, maybe. I was I was such a fan of his, And then I wrote a song that he recorded, and I also got to do. I got a call late one night when I was living in Hollywood, and they said, "Do you want to sing some backgrounds on a record?" And I said, "Sure." They said, "Well, the recording studio, I think it was might have been the band's recording studio up the coast a little bit." And I said, "So when should I be there?" The guy said 1 a.m. Okay.
Is it a rave?
Oh, it was Joe Cocker.
Yeah, I
And
know.
so it was that was really something. I was such a thrill for me.
And how do you handle something like that? You got to be professional, right? You can't like go in there all giddy.
No. Yeah, you gotta
Like I've been
pretend
doing
you
it my
want
whole life.
impress.
Yeah. You do covers.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play one. I'm gonna play like the first verse of one. So this is Marc Jordan covering "Free Falling."
She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus and America too. She's a good girl, crazy about Elvis, loves horses and her boyfriend too. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running right through the yard, and I'm a bad boy, 'cause I don't even miss her. I'm a bad boy for breaking her heart, 'cause I'm free falling.
I can kind of, and I don't want to. I might be wrong about this, but I can feel a little Bob Dylan come out of you when you cover that song.
No, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of the verses are half spoken, really.
Yeah. When I had Billy Vera on, he said something really interesting, and you guys are kind of from the same generation. I was just kind of wondering.
I know Billy Vera.
You know Billy Vera?
Yeah.
I like to anytime that I have an opportunity to have someone like yourself on, who's a legend inside the music industry, I like to talk about Black influence in your songwriting or in your music. And I was just wondering if you can, without me trying to extrapolate some big question, let's just leave it at that. And if you can give me an idea of the Black contribution to not just your career, but music in general, especially in North America.
It's everything.
Expand on that. Expand on
When
everything.
I was I was just trying to think how old I was when this happened. When I was about 12, 10, 11, 12, my mom bought me a radio, and it had a antenna, and I took a wire and I attached it to the drain pipe of the house and the other to the radio. And in those days, they didn't play any Black music in Canada or Toronto for sure. Nothing. Maybe a little Sammy Davis. That was it. It was a long time ago.
Mhm.
So when there was a storm in Cincinnati, I could get the gospel hour in Louisiana.
Wow.
And I heard the most unbelievable Black music, choral groups, church groups. I heard Sam Cooke, and it changed my life. This is they. Without that music, America's a country full of Pat Boones. I'm telling you, it they're the soul of America.
Yeah.
They are.
You know what's really interesting, and I'm not stretching this at all. When I was growing up in the early 90s, I couldn't find any hip hop, and the only place I could find it was if I put my radio outside and attached tinfoil to it
Yeah.
to get the only hip hop show that existed. And it happened to be in Toronto this time. But it's really interesting that you did the same thing. And that's how we both fell
Yeah.
in love with a certain kind of music. Mine was hip hop, and yours was, I guess, gospel soul, right?
Yeah.
Does good music come ultimately, not all of it obviously, but is there an adage out there that would state that a lot of good music comes from suffering?
Well,
Hardship, you know?
I've never really thought about that, but I certainly a type of music comes from that, and a very powerful music comes from being the underdog, being and suffering. I mean, no people have suffered more than African Americans. That's for damn sure. And out of it has come not only great music, but special people.
Yeah.
Special people. You know, Quincy Jones told me that when I had dinner with him, and he told me how he got his start. And you got a minute?
Yeah, please. Is this the Chitlin Tour story? I love that story. No? Go ahead,
No.
please.
Well, when he was a child, he joined a gang. I'll kind of make it short, but he was he joined a gang when he was young. He lived in a tenement. I met him in LA. I thought he was a Harvard educated, Mensa student. He spoke so beautifully, and is just amazing intelligence. And anyway, so he joined a gang, and one day the gang guy said, this is when he was about 10, and the gang leader said, we're breaking into this building because we're going to get some guns. So they all broke into this building on the weekend. And Quincy walked into a room. It was a factory. I don't know what the hell it was. But there was an old upright piano. And he went, boom, 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 boom. And that's it. And he walked out looking for guns. Didn't find guns. They went home. He went to bed at night. And he said he couldn't sleep all night just thinking about that piano. And in the morning, he asked his dad if he could get piano lessons. His dad says, I can't afford it. But in the next tenement, they had heard a guy playing piano. So his dad went door to door and tracked the guy down.
Wow.
And said, will you give my son piano lessons? They said, yeah.
That's amazing.
So how many young kids spend a life in jail but for something like that occurring in their life? Think about it.
And he's clearly, obviously, one of the greatest ever. And
a genius.
He was the first, if I recall correctly, maybe he was the first big name to just be like, I ain't playing the South. Right?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, they were segregated.
Yeah.
Maybe I get too much of my information from the movie Ray, which was an amazing movie, by the way. It was one of the greatest. Listen, the event tomorrow, Marc Jordan, waiting for the sun to rise. It's your album launch at the Paradise Theater.
Yeah.
The doors open at 7. The show is at 8:00. Are you do you get as excited for these shows these days as you always have? Is it always, do you have to come at it with a mindset of like, this is the show, this is it, let's do it, like, or do you kind of find yourself in a groove where it's like it's still just as awesome, but you have to approach it differently? Like, I'm curious about that kind of stuff, because I know a lot of musicians that got that. I know a lot of guys that go on tour and they almost seem annoyed by it, you know?
Well, no, I love to play live.
Yeah.
You know, the whole time I was in California, I never played live once. I was just working. I was just recording and writing songs for publishers. So that was almost 20 years. And when I came back, I did it, and I realized something, and there's a beautiful connection between an audience and a singer. And you get a lot of it's very gratifying, and you just I don't know what it is, but there's a connection that is formed in those 2 hours, and it's a beautiful thing. And I really missed it during COVID because the theaters all closed, and it really drove it home to me that people need to be around other people. And it's you know, you can only look at your cell phone so long and sit in your room and listen to music so much, but you need other people, and I think it's a special thing to sit in a room and listen to music together, you know, even
I
with
agree.
people you don't know.
Do you think the pandemic did something to creatives, that especially musicians and writers and people like that like, I feel like we're entering right now, the pandemic is basically over, right? And I feel like we're entering a new renaissance of music because people didn't have anything to do, and so creative types were like, well, I might as well just get to work. Have you noticed that?
Well, I noticed that's what they did. They just got to work. I mean, everybody's going broke, but we all kept working, and yeah, I'm hoping that some great stuff will come out of the other side. And you know, I've already heard some wonderful things, and you know, it's we need people. We need to be around people. We need to perform for people. We need to speak to people. Songs need to mean something, and they need to say something about the culture, and it's a powerful medium, and we need to use it for good.
Well, you're one of the greatest ever, and you definitely use it for good. Once again, Marc Jordan will be playing tomorrow at the Paradise Theater. Doors open at 7, and the show is at 8. Marc, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thanks,
All right.
James. Really
You have a good night,
nice.
sir.
Okay, man.
Marc Jordan. I mean, man, just think about all the stories that some of these guys have that have been like the people like Marc Jordan and Pat Carey and Billy Vera. You know, one of the things someone told me something last week, that they're like, James, you have all these like people on your show that are all like scattered, like you need a niche. I don't think I do. I would have liked to have a little bit more time to prepare for these interviews tonight because they were just back to back. That was the schedule that they had, and that's fine. But I could spend 3 hours talking to a guy like Marc Jordan. Anytime someone starts the sentence with, I was having dinner with Quincy Jones once, and he told me the story, you know you're in the right place. you know, but it was a real pleasure to talk to both of them tonight. Provided that Elon Musk doesn't destroy my world as he did last week, we will have Casual Friday at 9:00. The usual suspects will be there. I'm not sure if Emma's going to be there or not. I haven't talked to her, but Douglas will be there. Paul will probably be there. I'm trying to get this girl. I have the funniest story of a girl that I met on Kenny Robinson's, the comedian, his Facebook thread. And yeah, if she comes on the show, it's one of the funniest stories ever. We're now buds. And it's going to be, you guys will be really happy if she shows up, because I'm going to let her tell the story. She's amazing. She's like one of the funniest humans I've ever met, and I just met her like 2 days ago. So that is coming up at 9:00, and so we'll see you then. and that's not the right one. I'm having so much trouble with my intros today and outros. For some reason, I gave myself an intro and an outro. I don't know why I did that to myself because now I'm all confused. However, we'll see you next time on
Blackballed. 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 Blackballed.